Prepare for a rude awakening. "4,000 years ago, the creator of the universe made an everlasting covenant with Abraham. All the land, from the Euphrates to the Nile, belongs to the sons of Israel. Shock waves will shake the earth as heaven reaches down to fulfill that promise. Every nation that attempts to interfere with that covenant will march onto the battlefield against the Almighty. Prepare for a rude awakening."
Shalom to our fans. This is Michael Rood sailing the Red Sea, or in Hebrew, the Yam Suf, the body of water that the Israelites crossed on dry land nearly 3,400 years ago. This body of water covers a portion of the Great Rift, a 3,000-mile fracture in the Earth's crust that runs from modern-day Turkey deep into the continent of Africa. Just a few meters from the shore, the land drops off into a 5,000-foot gorge, nearly a mile straight down. Even if the Almighty removed all of the water in front of us and made dry land appear overnight, it would have been impossible for Israel to cross such a chasm. However, just 40 miles to the south, there is a huge beach, the only beach on this entire body of water that would be capable of handling the vast number of Israelites who fled Egypt. At that beach, an underwater land bridge drops off from the shoreline at an easily negotiable 6-degree slope. That bridge spans the Great Rift that separates the Sinai Peninsula of Egypt from the ancient land of Midian, now called Saudi Arabia. The land of Midian was where Moses was confronted by the Almighty in a burning bush while tending the flocks of Jethro, a prominent Bedouin sheik. In this A Rude Awakening series, you will venture with me and a divinely appointed cast of characters to the Red Sea crossing site, where we will witness the coral-encrusted remains of the Egyptian pharaoh's chariots and army strewn across the bottom of the Red Sea. You will see the evidence and hear their testimony, including the testimony of Dr. Leonard Moeller, a scientist from Karolinska Institute in Stockholm, Sweden, who assembled a team of scientists and technicians to investigate the chariots entombed in the coral. We will then journey to the ancient land of Midian, where for 9 years, Jim and Penny Caldwell, an American oil field engineer, and his wife secured hundreds of photographs, artifacts, and extensive video footage at the real Mount Sinai. We will start off this series with my record of how the first woman Palestinian homicide bomber ended up with her severed head in my hands in downtown Jerusalem. The Amalekites, who attacked the women and children at the back of the ranks after we crossed the Red Sea, were renamed Palestinians by the United Nations Propaganda Department fewer than 50 years ago. But they are not only the same people who have vexed Israel for the past 3,400 years, but they still use the same tactics. Now, Episode 1 in the 11-part series, The Sinai Connection, Israel's ancient title deed to the land. It was 4 years ago this month that Stan Johnson asked if I would do a tour of the 45 cities of the Prophecy Club. And he made a promise to me. He said that by doing this Prophecy Club venue that I would be able to get my message out to the entire world. And Stan's promise came true. The first video that we filmed, which was done at the Lester Summerall Studios on the great secret of Solomon's Temple, detailed how the Messiah, Yeshua, fulfilled the spring feast of the Lord, just as the Israelites had rehearsed these feasts every year for 1,000 years, from the time of King Solomon all the way through the destruction of the Second Temple. And it is in the feast of the Lord, the spring feast of the Lord, that we see the picture of the Messiah as the suffering servant. We also saw that the temple that Solomon built actually had a sand hydraulic elevator system built into the temple in order to hide the Ark of the Covenant in the time of siege. In our first video that we did with the Prophecy Club, we detailed that sand hydraulic elevator system, and we took people into an understanding of the spring feast of the Lord, and that video ended up on every continent of the world. Shortly after that, we did a 10-hour series in which we taught for 5 hours on the spring feast of the Lord, 5 hours on the fall feast of the Lord, recognizing again that the first 4 Gospels are the detail of how the Messiah fulfilled the spring feast of the Lord, but yet the book of Revelation details how the Messiah fulfills the fall feast of the Lord. And unless we understand the feasts of the Lord, then we cannot understand much of the New Testament. And the book of Revelation will remain an indecipherable time warp continuum to the Western Gentile mind. And so it is in the teaching of that, those tapes, those videos went out all over the world, and even today, 4 years later, we get letters, we get phone calls from people on other continents all over the world that call us, that write us and tell us that these videos, this teaching on the Feast of the Lord has dramatically changed their lives. And so when Stan asked me 6 months ago if I would consider doing another Prophecy Club tour, the information that I have to share with you tonight, I believe, is going to shake the world. And that is why I have come from Jerusalem to do this. During this last period of time, we are now in the middle of our 3rd year of living in Jerusalem, where we are now producing 1/2-hour television programs, which will be airing on the Sky Angel television network and several other networks around the world. But the reason that we are in Jerusalem is because of that first Prophecy Club video that was done. During the tour, I got a call from Costa Rica asking if I would come down and teach more about the Feast of the Lord to a group of ultra-Orthodox Jews, Lubavitchers. Now, when I received the call, I did recall that in Cleveland, many nights we'd have 300-400 people in the audience, and there would be 3-4 rows of black hats, ultra-Orthodox, black hats, peyotes, the black coats, and at the end of the meeting they would always come up and ask very respectful questions. And so when I was invited to go to Costa Rica to teach, it surprised me a little bit. And so I asked them why it was, when I went down there finally, why it was that they wanted to hear more about these feasts of the Lord. And they said that when we watched the video, we could tell within the first 15 minutes that from what you were teaching, that the Christians would finally understand and have respect for the Jewish people. And so that was quite a revelation to me, and so that was the reason why I was down in Costa Rica. But it seems there was another reason. Because a gentleman who was the professional Spanish voice for Robert Schuller, Jack Hayford, Jack Van Impe, and a number of American evangelists, he was their voice in the Spanish language for the largest Spanish Christian television network on the planet. And she said, "Is she hurt? Is she okay?" And I said, "She's got some wounds, but that is her husband." She looked at the man in the street and then came over and wrapped her arms around her sister. I stepped aside. The screaming has died down. There are police that are now rushing into the area. The sirens are blaring. And as I look around, I see that the living are being taken care of. And as I step back, I realize that this young woman's head laying on the ground is right in the evacuation path where the ambulances, the stretchers need to come in. And so I go over, I reach down, I pick up this young woman's head and I put it in my arms, and I look around and there's a piece of a blue banner that was blown down from the building, and I went and got the banner and I wrapped her head up as best I could. And I just imagined, as I was holding this woman's head in my hands, that this is a young Jewish mother with her children in school, her husband's at work, and on this beautiful Sunday morning, it'll be hours before they know that their wife, that their mother is dead. And this is all that I can think of as I had this woman's head in my hands. And I looked for a place to put it down, and I decided to go over and put it by a concrete pillar that's a little bit out of the way. And then I stepped back and I realized I just can't leave her head there, because when they begin to clean up, when someone picks up that banner, then they're going to see that head, and it just can't be treated like this. So as the Israeli police were coming in, I got a hold of the senior officer and I said, I wrapped up a woman's head and I put her head over by that pillar. And the officer said, lo mavin anglit, I don't understand English. And for the life of me, I couldn't think of, the head of a woman, Rosh Isha, to save my life at that moment. I was a little bit shaken by this thing. And so I said it very slowly, and then I gestured, and then I could tell by the look on his face when he said, "Head of a woman?" I said, "Yes." I could tell that he then understood. And he shook his head, and then I stepped back. I knew then, as the stretchers were coming in, as the ambulances were pulling up from both directions, it's just time for me to leave. And so I walk away. I get about a block away, and I stop, and I realize I better take a closer look at myself. And I looked down at my sandaled feet, the same sandals that I'm wearing now, and looked at me, and I had little pieces of flesh and blood all over the front of me, and I held out my hands, and it surprised me. I was rock steady. I didn't even have an adrenaline rush going on. I then walked the 3 miles back to the apartment, which was a long, long walk, because it's hard having to relive that moment, that time in which all this happened, and holding that woman's head in my hands. I just kept reliving it with every step, and it was so hard to make that walk back. And when I got back to the apartment, I looked up the 4th story, that's where the apartment was, and I saw Roberto, our Spanish producer from Costa Rica, looking out the window at me, and he disappeared when he saw me. I climbed the stairs, got to the door, and he opened the door and said very, very calmly, he said, "Chaim is okay, but he's at the hospital. He has a piece of glass shrapnel in his forehead from a bomb that went off downtown Jerusalem." And I raised my hands, which are covered in blood, and I said, "I know, I was there." But I hadn't seen Chaim in over 3 hours. How is it that Chaim was involved in this? I took my clothes off, asked Roberto to get them down to the dry cleaners. We just had to get them out of the house. The smell of that burning flesh was just nauseating. And as he took them out of the apartment, I went into the bathroom and I looked at myself in the mirror, and there was not a single hair on my head that was singed. See, when we found out what happened later that afternoon, Chaim came back from the hospital, and his fiancée was getting ready to board a plane the next morning in Miami to fly to Israel for them to become betrothed and for them to start their life and their family in Jerusalem. So this is a very sobering moment at this point, that he's going to bring the woman that he loves over to Israel, and he has just gone through this and seen these same things. And we began then to relate our stories back to each other, and we found out then what happened. Because that morning, Chaim was walking down Jaffa Street, and as he went by the front of Jaffa 50, the shoe store, he saw a sign for now sandals. Knowing that he needed to have his sandals resoled, he went in and spoke to the gentleman who was the store owner, and he was standing in the store when a young woman brought in a bag. She set it on the floor, she took a few steps back, and the cashier said, "Excuse me, can I help you?" She flustered, she picked up the bag and walked out the door just as I passed. I took 4 more steps, and on my 4th step, I was squarely on the other side of a 16-inch wide concrete pillar. She took 4 more steps, and the bomb went off. And the entire blast blew completely past me, blew the entire front of the store in, and on the other side of a solid wood wall, that is where that glass shrapnel went through and cut Chaim in the forehead. Chaim immediately began to assist the wounded on the inside. You know, if that morning, if I were praying that morning and I heard a voice from heaven, "Rood, Rood." That's what he calls me. He knows how I act. He knows my name. "I want you to walk downtown Jerusalem today, and I am going to blow up the largest bomb that's ever been blown up by a terrorist in downtown Jerusalem just a few feet away from you. People that are further away from the bomb are going to have their legs and arms blown off, but I'm going to show you that not a hair of your head will be singed, that I am able to protect you." If I heard that in a revelation, a voice from heaven that morning, I believe that I would still be under my bed today. There is no way that I would ever want to walk into a situation like that knowing what is about to take place. Chaim Goldman would never have wanted to walk into a situation like that if we would have known what was going to take place. But that is exactly what happened. The Almighty took us to that place right downtown Jerusalem and showed us that He is able to protect us. And it was Roberto who said and reminded us that the safest place for us to be is in the will of the Almighty. Join us again next time for episode 2 of the 11-part series, The Sinai Connection, Israel's ancient title deed to the land. This is Michael Rood, sailing the Yam Suf, bidding you shalom, peace, and I'll see you when the smoke clears.